Hey there everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Adventurer's Arsenal. In this series, I'll be using the power of Minecraft's commands and functions to make some custom-coded weapons, armor, items, companions, and pretty much anything else I can think of. I'll be coding out each of these step by step to demonstrate how to make them for yourselves, and hopefully teach you how to code in Minecraft in the process. So with that in mind, we'll get started on our very first companion, which will be Solaire from the Dark Souls franchise. So Solaire will be our personal buddy who will wait behind or follow us around on command. He'll attack our enemies, and he'll even sometimes throw a deadly lightning spear that will kill mobs in one hit. First, we'll write the code for two entities that we'll be needing. First, we have a zombie pigman who will represent Solaire. He's named Solaire, tagged with Solaire and not target. I made him silent, made him a baby because baby Solaire is totally adorable, trust me on that one. I made him persistent so that he won't disappear, he's invulnerable, and I've kitted him out with some chainmail armor, an iron sword, and a custom patterned shield that's modeled after the sunlight shield from Dark Souls. Next up is a wolf, who's tagged with Solaire Wolf, Wolf Setup, and Not Target, and he's silent and invulnerable, and later on you'll see the purpose of all these weird tags that both of these guys have on them. So I've placed both of these lines of code in a function called looped. However, they'll be commented out and won't actually do anything unless you were to copy and paste them into chat or into a command block, like I set up over here in this pen. So we'll just spawn these guys in here, and you'll also notice that I've given the chainmail armor some custom textures to match Solaire's armor from the game. And it's not perfect by any means, but I think it's actually pretty decent. And I actually do especially like the job I did on the chest piece. But anyways, we'll just leave these two here for right now, and we'll get back to them in a second. Next, I'll create all of the scoreboard objectives that we'll be needing for this, and these will also be kept in the looped function as well, which, by the way, I hadn't mentioned, will be constantly run by using the game rule gameloop function, which basically takes a function that you've written and constantly runs all of the valid commands that are written inside of it. So it's basically like a repeating command block, except it can run as many lines of code as you want, as opposed to just one. And I'll explain more about each of these objectives as they come up in the code. Okay, so now that we've got Solaire and Solaire Wolf, we can begin working on the first piece of functionality, which is to have Solaire follow us around. So as you most probably know, I assume at this point, you can tame wolves and have them follow you around and attack for you. So we're going to hijack this AI, in a sense, to have the zombie pigman appear to do these things instead, which we'll accomplish by doing the following things. First, we'll constantly execute at Solaire Wolf to teleport Solaire to the wolf's exact coordinates and exact X and Y rotation. And this will cause Solaire to mimic the movements of the wolf, which will make it look like that Solaire is following us. At the moment, however, you might notice that something kind of odd is happening. They're kind of just pushing each other around, which is because of their colliders. But luckily, this is an easy fix. All we have to do is create a team called No Collide, then change the option collision rule of No Collide to push other teams, and then place Solaire and the wolf on the team No Collide. And this will prevent them from pushing each other, while still being able to collide with other entities who are not on the team No Collide. And lastly, we'll apply the invisibility effect to the wolf for 1 second, with an amplifier of 0, setting the hide particles field to true, and now we can't see the wolf at all. So if we tame the wolf with some bones, which you can tell is happening by the particles that you can see here, and then if we walk around with it, it'll look like Solaire is following us all on his own, when in actuality it's the wolf that's doing all the work for us. Now, let's see this in action. So the wolf will teleport to me since I'm moving far enough away from him, and Solaire will tag along, and if we walk away... Yeah, here he comes. Who's a good boy? Let's go find your son, Solaire. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, and you won't go totally crazy. Okay, now we need a system to tell Solaire whether to follow us or to stay put where he is. And you might actually be asking, well, wait a minute, isn't that what wolves do already? Can't we just right-click on the wolf to have him either stay or follow us? And that's true, you could do that. However, this wolf is invisible, and that can actually make it hard for us to tell whether he's sitting down or following us. And the other problem is that if we try to right-click on him, the pigman's model could actually get in the way of that click, since they're right on top of each other, so the click might not go through. And this is because we're technically clicking on the pigman, because he's in the way of the wolf's collider. So we're going to develop a system that will work around these issues, and it'll also relay a message to the player to let them know whether Solaire is staying or following. This is where the objectives jumping and sneaking will come into play. Jumping is tied to the criterion stat.jump, which is a statistic that tracks the number of times a player has jumped, and sneaking is tied to stat.sneaktime, which tracks how long a player has spent sneaking. So a player's score in jumping will increase every time they jump, and sneaking increases as a player sneaks. And together these two will work so that if a player sneaks and jumps at the same time while near Solaire, he will either follow us or stay behind, which is dependent on his current state. And this will only work if Solaire has been tamed, otherwise he won't do anything. And we'll also be using a third objective called Order Cool later on. In our first bit of code here, if Solaire Wolf is ever sitting down, then he'll be given the tag sitting. And then down here, if a player jumps, increasing jumping to 1, then their score will be set to 4. And then from here, jumping will count down from 4 to 2, and then when it hits 2, it'll be set back to 0. And what this does is it basically creates a small window of time for Solaire to recognize that we're trying to get him to change his state. And then we'll set up the exact same system for sneaking, just replacing every instance of jumping with the word sneaking instead. Then we'll execute at all players whose score in sneaking and jumping both equal at least 1 to execute an entity who's tagged with sitting, whose score in Order Cool is at most 0, and who's within a radius of 3. So in other words, we're trying to target the wolf here. To run the function stand, and in this case below, the function sit if the tag is standing. And now Order Cool is an objective that acts as a cooldown period before Solaire can change his state again. And without it, these two functions can actually execute in quick succession of each other and cause the system to not work properly. Inside of our new functions here are just a few simple lines of code. In stand, we remove the tag sitting, add the tag standing, and set the sitting data tag of the wolf to 0, causing him to stand up. We then relay a short little message to let the player know that Solaire is now following them, and set Order Cool to 20 for the wolf. And the function sit is basically the same, with some minor differences. We instead remove the tag standing, set sitting to 1, which will cause the wolf to sit and automatically be assigned the tag sitting because of that code back in the looped function. We'll then play a different message indicating that Solaire will stay put, and then as we did in the other function, 20 will be added to Order Cool. So the reason that the wolf is tagged with sitting if he ever sits is because it introduces him into the system, and without it, he wouldn't have any way of obtaining the sitting or standing tags, which are received from the sit and stand functions, but are also required in order to run them in the first place, resulting in a sort of catch-22 kind of deal. And now I could change the wolf summon code and start him off with the standing or sitting tag as an alternate way of getting him in the system, but then that would allow the player to have him sit and stand even though he isn't tamed yet, which goes against one of my goals I was trying to achieve with this mechanic. And similarly, if I always tagged him with standing, if he isn't sitting, then the same thing would be true. And so this way, the only way of getting him into the system and allowing the player to change his state is by taming him, because taming a wolf causes them to automatically sit down, which then subsequently causes Solaire Wolf to become tagged with sitting. And now we just have 3 more lines of code here, and then we'll be set with this part. So 1 will be removed from Order Cool every tick until it hits 0, at which point Solaire will be ready to receive a new state change. And in case you didn't know, 20 in-game ticks is equal to 1 real-life second. So in this case, with 1 being removed from Order Cool every tick, and with Order Cool starting off at 20 from the code written in the sit and stand functions, then that means it'll take 1 second before Solaire will be ready to change his state again. Finally, we need to register the wolf on the Order Cool scoreboard, and this is because the sit and stand functions can only activate if the wolf score in Order Cool is at most 0, and the only way to target an entity using a score parameter is if they have received a value in that objective at some point, and have therefore been registered on that particular scoreboard objective. And right now, similar to the sitting and standing tag situation that I described before, the only way for the wolf to receive a value in Order Cool is through the sit and stand functions, which you can't run without having first received a value in Order Cool. But we can fix this in 2 simple commands. First, we'll target an entity with the tag wolf setup, which if you remember I tagged the wolf with earlier when I created his spawn code, and we'll have him set his own score in Order Cool to 0, which will put him on the board. And then immediately afterward, he'll remove the tag wolf setup from himself, which prevents him from constantly setting his score in Order Cool to 0, which would then mess up our cooldown timer. So basically, when we spawn him, these will both happen instantaneously. And the wolf will be all set up and initialized. Alright, so now let's just make sure that everything's in place and is working here. So you can see right now that Solaire is following us, and let's just get him over here with his adorable pit-pattering little feet. It's amazing. Okay, so now if we sneak and jump, we should get the message. There it is. And now he should stay where he is. Looks good. Yeah, okay, looks good. So now if we do that again, then he should begin following us again. And there's a message, and he should follow us. Yeah, okay, awesome. So that works. Now we can begin working on the next part, which will be the lightning spear. So the way that I want this to work is that every once in a while when we're in combat, Solaire will throw a lightning spear at random, but only if he's following us, not if he's sitting. So I'm going to create a simple random number generator that will determine whether a lightning spear was successfully rolled for, and if so, then Solaire will throw a one-hit KO spear at an enemy, and that enemy will be dependent on whatever enemy we've just attacked, which will then cause the natural AI of the wolf to then target that enemy. First, there are certain entities that I don't want to be killed by the spear, and these entities have to be properly identified with the tag not target. The lightning spear projectile will only kill entities that don't have this tag, and so by adding this tag to an entity, we ensure that it can't be killed by the spear. And if you recall, Solaire and Solaire Wolf are both tagged with not target when they're summoned, because it would obviously be quite silly if, upon firing a spear, the both of them just died, exploded right on the spot, because they were in range of the attack. So we don't want that. And for my purposes, I've given all players this tag as well, though you could certainly remove that for PvP situations or what have you. And I've also protected items and XP orbs so that any dropped loot isn't lost, and I've done the same with item frames and armor stands so that any items in or on them aren't lost either. And lastly, I've also tagged area effect clouds, just because it maybe felt a little weird for them to have the ability to trigger the projectile and be killed, even though they're just like a cloud of particles, but again, you could easily change that or any of this to meet your specific needs and purposes. Next, we need some kind of way for Solaire to identify when we're in combat so that he knows when to try rolling for a lightning spear, and using the objective damage dealt would do just that. Damage dealt is tied to the criterion stat.damage dealt, which tracks how much total damage a player has inflicted upon other mobs. And when we cause damage, and damage dealt becomes equal to at least 1, we'll execute from the wolf only if his tag is standing, meaning his state is set to follow, and if he's within 10 blocks of the player, to add 1 to his score in lightning charge, which is an objective that represents how many times the player has caused damage to mobs. And every time damage dealt reaches at least 1, it'll be set back to 0, so that we can continue charging up for a chance to get a spear. Next comes the RNG. Every tick will add 1 to the wolf's score in a new objective called Chance Time, and once Chance Time reaches 4, it'll be set back to 0, and this will result in a pool of 4 values, those being 0, 1, 2, and 3. And 4 isn't actually counted because it's changed to 0 too fast, the way we're using it, for it to be factored into the pool. And using these values, we can designate the percent chance that Solaire will fire a lightning spear. When the wolf's score in lightning charge reaches 5, meaning we've caused damage to mobs 5 times, and chance time is at most 1, and a new objective called lightning launch is at most 0, this means a lightning spear was successfully rolled for. In this instance, the chance of a lightning spear is 50%, since of those 4 values in the pool, we needed either a 0 or a 1. After a successful roll, the wolf score in lightning launch will be set to 60. And so lightning launch will handle running commands concerning firing off the spear, which we'll get to later. And the reason we have it here as part of this parameter is so that another spear can't be spawned while one is already in the process of being fired. A value in lightning launch any higher than 0 indicates that the spear is still being prepared for launch. And again, due to the nature of the code here, we have another catch-22 kind of situation. So Solaire Wolf will have to be registered in lightning launch when he's spawned, just like we did with Order Cool. And here we'll set lightning charge back to 0 once it hits 5 so that Solaire can begin charging up for a spear again. Next is prepping the spear. To start, 1 will be removed from lightning launch every tick, and because its value begins at 60, that gives us 3 seconds before it counts down to 0. And just to note that every time I target an entity here with a certain score in lightning launch, we are talking about Solaire Wolf. When lightning launch hits 59, we'll summon an armor stand above Solaire Wolf, and this will actually act as our projectile. He'll be invulnerable, tagged with Ray Gary and not target. He's invisible, uses the small armor stand model, is equipped with an elytra, and has fall flying set to 1. And those last 2 things meaning that when we spawn him, he will begin to glide downward using the elytra. Then we'll constantly run a command that has Solaire Wolf teleport an entity tagged with Ray Gary, which is the armor stand, to his relative coordinates with +2 to Y, and his relative X and Y rotations. And this means that the armor stand will be held up 2 blocks above the wolf, and wherever the wolf looks, the armor stand will point in that direction as well, which acts as a raycast of sorts, hence his tag of Ray Gary. He's tagged as not target to indicate that he isn't a valid target of the lightning spear, otherwise it would actually literally kill itself, which would be ridiculous and not very helpful, actually. And over time, this armor stand is actually going to be building up momentum, because even though it's hanging over the wolf's head, it's still gliding along in place with the elytra, and you can actually see it moving forward ever so slightly in the direction the wolf is facing, almost like it's trying to break free or something. And we'll be using this momentum here in just a second. The wolf will then be continuously given the slowness effect for 2 seconds at an amplifier of 5 while he's preparing to fire the spear, and this will prevent him from moving around while he's firing, though he can still freely rotate and look around. And I have it this way just so that he doesn't charge into the enemy and kill them before the spear actually has a chance to do anything, and also so that you can actually see the spear's path of travel over a distance. Then, to polish things a bit, I'll have this sound played a few times as the attack begins to indicate Solaire is about to fire a spear, and some crit particles will be generated while the attack is charging, which sort of vaguely resembles sparking electricity, I think. Finally, we'll fire off the spear and watch it go to work. So when lightning launch reaches 1, the armor stand will receive the tag Light Gary, which indicates that it's ready to fire. We'll then remove the tag Ray Gary from entities tagged with Light Gary. Now, because the wolf will only teleport entities tagged with Ray Gary to his relative coordinates and rotation, and the armor stand no longer has that tag, this will cause the stand to use the momentum it's been building up to shoot off in the direction that the wolf was last pointing. And the direction the wolf was pointing is dependent on whatever enemy we attacked, causing the wolf's natural AI to begin pursuing and attacking that enemy as well. And from that armor stand, who's now tagged as Light Gary, will execute at all entities whose tag is not equal to not target, and who's within 2 blocks to run the function Light Spear Effects, which we'll get to in a moment. But before we do that, we need to give the projectile some particle effects so that it can actually be seen, since right now it's just invisible. So we'll make use of these crit particles again, making them appear just below the armor stand, and every tick the stand will be teleported upwards by 0.1, which will help offset the descent of its travel with an elytra, and cause the armor stand to move in a straight line. And if the spear doesn't make contact with an enemy after a certain period of time, or if it hits the ground, then I want it to be destroyed. So every tick the stand is alive, it will receive 1 to its score in Light Gary Alive, which is an objective that will track how long Light Gary has existed in the game world. After Light Gary's score reaches 100, meaning it's been alive for 5 seconds, it'll be killed. And we can check to see if it's on the ground with the data tag On Ground. If this value is true for Light Gary, then we'll add the tag Light on Ground to the stand, and subsequently any entity tagged with Light on Ground will be killed. And onto our last new function, Light Spear Effects. This function will be run by any entities who come in contact with the spear who are not tagged with Not Target. They'll play these 3 spider sounds, which sort of sound like crackling electricity when they're slowed down. We'll generate some more crit particles, and finally this entity will kill the armor stand and then kill itself. And with that said, everything is coded and we are done here. So you know what? I think it's time for some good old-fashioned jolly cooperation. Alright, whew, man, the last boss was tough. This game's hard. Gosh. Alright, what do we have here? Whoa. Whoa. There's a lot of dudes. Oh, but I think that's a bonfire. Oh, man. Okay, gotta get to that, but I'm all by myself. I can't possibly get past this without someone's help. Oh, well. Let's just go over here. Oh, who's this? Oh, hey, little guy. Hey there. What you doing? Hey. You wanna come with me, little guy? What's your name? No, wait, come back here. What's your name? Solaire. Ooh. I can get behind some jolly cooperation. Let's go. Yeah. Let's go. Alright. Okay. I can do this. I got this guy with me. He has a sun on his chest. We're gonna do this. Alright. Let's get in there. Yeah. Oh, man. Oh boy. Oh. Oh, frick. Wow, okay. Good job, Solaire. Aha. Let's go get the rest of these guys. They don't stand a chance. No. Come hither. Oh, jeez. Can you help? Can you just... Okay, good boy. I'll get this guy. Yeah, you zap him. 2 guys left. Let's go get... Oh, looks like there's... there's a little mutiny going on. Yeah, he helped me. Now get him. Yeah. Oh. Oh, we're the best. We're so awesome. This game's so easy. This game's so easy. Everyone complains about it. And there's a bonfire. There are these black scorch marks, but it's fine. Probably not. So, oh god, Solaire, help me. Solaire, help me. Oh. That'll do it for today, but thank you so very much for watching. Solaire took quite some time to make and to get just right, but it was totally a blast, and he even turned out pretty well, I think. And though I made something from a game this time, in the future I definitely plan to tackle weapons, items, etc. that I just make up myself, and I may even code out things from books, movies, comic books, and whatnot. And that said, if you've got any suggestions for anything you'd like to see me make in the future, or even just in general, if you've got questions, thoughts, feedback, or any of that good stuff on what you saw today, then by all means let me know down in the comments. And if you liked what you saw, then consider leaving a like, perhaps, or maybe even subscribing and hitting that bell icon if you're so inclined, to get notified when more of my creations come out. Thanks again for watching, and until next time.